Independence City Council study session for Monday, December 10th, 2018. We have several presentations this evening. The first is our Advisory Board of Health Annual Report. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, per our city charter, tonight we are joined by Dr. Ralph Ruckman, the chairman of our Advisory Board of Health, for the annual report for the city council. So I would invite Dr. Ruckman forward at this time.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
That is such a popular phrase, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. Yeah, that one too. Well, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Dr. Ralph Ruckman, and I'm the chair of the Advisory Board of Health for the City of Independence. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank you for the opportunity tonight to present the 2018 Independence Advisory Board of Health Annual Report. Tonight, I will be sharing with you the efforts of the Board of Health, the Health Department, during the 2018 year, which efforts are in line with the city's strategic plan. As you know, the Advisory Board of Health advises the city on matters pertaining to the public health. The board consists of 10 members, 4 licensed medical practitioners, 1 dentist, 1 veterinarian, and 4 lay members. Tonight, I would like to welcome 2 new board members. Number 1, the first one is Dr. Daryl Nelson, Chief Medical Officer of Centerpoint Medical Center. And number 2, the second new member is Dr. Matt Wingert, veterinarian at Independence Animal Hospital. In 2018, the board addressed many subjects, including CPR training and resources, the Medical Reserve Corps of Kansas City, and the transition of the health department and its duties. In February, the city announced the reorganization of the health department and the transition of its duties in order to improve efficiency. The department had provided many services in its division, which included animal services, permitted establishments, communicable disease and immunizations, and disease prevention. However, the city had identified that many of these services were being also performed by the Jackson County Health Department. Therefore, the decision was made to transfer staff and responsibilities to other departments. The animal services staff was moved and now reports to the police department. Permitted establishments staff was moved to the community development and was made part of the regulated industries division. And disease prevention was made into the new wellness division of the Parks, Recreation, Tourism Department. These moves were made with a minimum interruption of staff while retaining services for our citizens. Overall, 17 of the staff members were transferred to other departments, including police, community development, parks, recreation, tourism, fire, and public works. Additionally, 1 staff member found employment with Jackson County Health Department, 5 found outside employment, and 2 retired. This resulted in an overall reduction of 7.1 full-time equivalent employees for the city. The estimated cost savings of approximately $375,000 annually will, over the next 5 years, save the city an estimated $1.8 million. Collaboration with the health department's transition, our board has continued With the health department's transition, our board has continued to remain connected with the health-related departments outside agencies and have received reports from the groups on activities and progress. Some of those activities I am here to share with you tonight. Now housed within the police department, the animal services staff investigate animal abuse and neglect, respond to animal bite situations, and are also responsible for unrestrained animals. Animal services officers sought to meet the city's goal of improved customer service by responding to over 3,700 phone calls this year, and of those calls, over 600 animals were taken to the regional animal shelter. For the Operation Litter Less program, Animal Services issued almost 300 free or reduced cost spay and neuter vouchers to qualifying Independence Jackson County residents. The Wellness Group within the Parks, Recreation, Tourism Department oversees community and employee wellness initiatives for the city. Staff continued oversight of the White Oak Community Garden and partnered with Kansas City Gardens for classes and seed distribution. The staff were active in the move of the farmers market to the Uptown Market space and are happy to announce that the market is now open once a month during the winter. Staff organized and held the ever-popular Independence Park Trot 5K and have already started work on next year's event. The 2019 Park Trot will be on Saturday, April 27th, and registration for the free event will open on January 1. Staff is coordinating with the ISD, the Independence School District, and state to fulfill grant responsibilities related to the School Wellness Index. Staff organized flu clinics and partnered with Healthy Solutions to administer flu vaccines. A total of 352 vaccines were administered. Staff has strategically placed an AED in several buildings throughout the city and have worked to train employees on its use. Housed within community development, the Permitted Establishments Unit regulates, educates, and licenses through routine inspections, complaint investigations, and continuous training in all food, drink establishments, retail, grocery, child daycare facilities, lodging, massage therapy, tattoo parlors, and commercial swimming pools and spas. Pursuant to the city's strategic plan to promote industry best practices and attract visitors to our community, the Permitted Establishments Unit has conducted 2,031 inspections as of the end of November and is expected to complete an additional 229 inspections before the end of the year. 4,132 food handler, food manager permits have been issued in 2018. These efforts ensure quality restaurants and lodging facilities for our city. To address public health emergency preparedness staff coordinated a point of dispensing exercise in March and a long-term care evacuation exercise in October. Both events included multiple departments and multiple agencies. An emergency preparedness planner has also taken over as the Medical Reserve Corps KC coordinator. The Medical Reserve Corps of Kansas City, which is a network of medical and public health volunteers who volunteer throughout the greater Kansas City area during disasters, recently reactivated and rehomed to Independence. Jackson County Health Department provides public health services for disease prevention, health promotion, and protection of the environment. For Independence, they have taken over communicable diseases investigations and immunizations and continue to provide birth and death certificates for residents. They also have been great partners for incorporating members of our Community Health Improvement Plan into their plan for Jackson County. We are looking forward to continued collaboration to make the transition an ongoing success. And do you have any questions at this time?
Thanks, Dr. Ruckman. That was a great presentation. It's always amazing to see how much is going on in our health services around the city, and we appreciate the Advisory Board of Health continuing to be so involved as we've gone through this transition. Are there any comments or questions from the council? Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Ruckman. Appreciate the presentation and all the work that the Board of Health does. So pass on to the rest of the board our thanks from the City Council, if you would, please. I just had one question. It was on the last page. It has to do with the audits. I see that we're no longer doing the child care immunization audits, and the county is not doing that as well. So the only question I would have, and this may be an item of discussion for the Board of Health, how much is this going to affect disease and independence? Because I believe there were over 60 facilities that were inspected at one time or another for immunization. So those would have been preschools or daycares, and they had to keep records, and they were not allowed to have kids there unless they actually were up to date with their immunizations. Now, I know the county used to do some of that, and of course the city did too. So without doing that, many times there were a number of facilities that didn't have the records, or a number of those kids that didn't get the immunizations until they reach school age, and most of the public schools require that unless they have a parent's excuse that says they don't want it. But at least that portion of the herd of kids was immunized, and the larger the group in the herd, the less likely we're going to have an outbreak of measles or anything else, rubella. So could you at least talk about that maybe with the Board of Health? You don't have to answer any questions tonight, but I thought it would be worth asking somebody in the epidemiology area, and that's not your expertise or ours, but ask somebody that's an epidemiologist about that, and ask them if it's worthwhile for us to seek out that from the county.
This has been a discussion that we've had, and so we have thought about this particular issue as well. And because, as you mentioned, Jackson County doesn't do that, and we used to in that respect. But I think part of the issue is that there hasn't been any real evidence of problems lately, and so I think, you know, that's part of the sense of where it's at right now. And
Hello, good evening. My name is Christina Heinen. I'm Special Projects Manager for the City of Independence, and I'm the City Manager's designee to fulfill the responsibilities for the City Code as it comes to the Health Director. The Board of Health has been concerned about this, so they asked me to look a little bit into where we are now. Right now, the daycares, child care centers that are permitted in the city, there's only one that is currently has fewer than 10 children that they're watching. Anything that's 10 or over actually falls under state regs that require that immunization audit and for them to keep their records. So we have one right now that actually is with the school district that falls underneath that. As you probably know, we have one of the nurses for the school district is part of our Board of Health. They are committed to making sure that those immunizations are kept up. We're not saying that it's not a concern moving forward. Right now, though, we know that they are falling under state regs, and so it's something that the Board of Health is committed to continuing to monitor to make sure that we're not having anyone fall through the cracks.
Since it falls under the state, does the state inspect them, or they have to report to the state then?
My understanding is the state does do inspections. They don't do them exactly the same way we do them, but they do them on, my understanding is an annual basis, but they do more spot checks, so they look at 10% of all of the children that are there and
Okay.
spot check those records.
Thanks.
Yes, Councilman?
So, am I to understand that there's an age at where they come under state?
My understanding is if they're in a child care center that is permitted by the state, and the state has numbers that they look at, and there's more than 10 children that are there at that child care center, then they either have to be up to date on the recommended vaccinations, or they have to have that state exemption letter.
So the age requirement is not there?
My understanding is there's not.
Okay.
I am not a nurse nor an expert in that, so take that with that grain of salt, but
But what we would cover is covered by the state,
currently, yes, for all but one of our facilities,
which has under 10 or?
which has
or
under
is-
10.
Okay.
We only have one at this time.
Thank you. Doctor? Yes, sir. During the change, if I'm reading this right, these transfers was people who were working at these places anyway and went to the different, I mean, we didn't just pick people and say, you go here and you go there. These are people who were assigned anyway to those groups. Okay. Because I was looking to get 4 more people for food inspections out of these people that you put somewhere else.
Yeah,
But that
sorry,
is their program anyway.
Yeah, the Board of Health really didn't have any participation in those actual issues as far as those individuals and the departments, but, I think everybody was pretty well matched up with the area that they ended up being transferred to, and I think things are looking really well, and I think the transition is going exceptionally well, considering, how big a project it really was.
Thank you.
Any
Anything
other
else?
questions?
Thank you, Dr. Ruckman.
Okay, one last comment. I would like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. I know I haven't seen much of that or heard it much, but I thought I'd break the ice and say that to the city staff and the mayor and the council and the citizens of Independence, and enjoy the holiday season. I hope it goes well for everybody, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, next is our Independence EDC quarterly update. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to ask Tom Lesnick, the president of the Independence Economic Development Council, to come forward for a quarterly update on our efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, and good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Tom Lesnick. I serve as president of the Independence Economic Development Council, and just want to give you a real, I'll say brief, I won't promise that, but I'll do as well as I can. Just kind of an overview of what's going on, the activities of the Economic Development Council, and of course, always appreciate the questions you may have as part of the presentation. Just to real quickly give you some background on the EDC. We were formed in 1983 as kind of a public-private partnership. A group of business leaders, along with some elected officials, got together and realized that having a third party doing economic development made a lot of sense. There's issues of confidentiality and sunshine laws that sometimes collide with each other, and so the decision in 1983 was to form this group, and ever since then we've operated as a nonprofit 501c6. Currently, I have a staff of 4.5 people, and our budget is about $574,000. We have 200 private sector investors, so the city's funding is really leveraged by those 200 private sector investors, just private companies who are supporting economic development here in Independence. And then we also operate the Innovation Center Business Incubator, and I'll talk in more detail about that here in just a few moments. I want to show you kind of how our revenue sources break down. We get this question quite a bit. When I got to Independence about almost 12 years ago, we were very dependent on the city contract for services. That at that time represented almost 70% of our revenue source. It's always been my goal to diversify that revenue source and look at ways where if anything catastrophic happened in one area or another, the organization could survive. And so we've really worked towards growing our private sector base. So we went from what was about 35 private sector investors back in 2007 to where we are today with 200. We also have kind of grown our program income in terms of services we provide But I will say that services we provide to existing businesses in the community and companies looking at independence, there's no charge for. There never has been a charge for. Services that we do charge for are related to lease rates at the Innovation Center. So we have space there that we lease to clients they use for growing their businesses. So that plays a portion of it. So it's really kind of divided among three different areas: our city contract, which is $170,000, our private sector investors, and then also our program income and Innovation Center income. So it's kind of those pools of money that are used. And our contract with the city, although we've modified it slightly over the years since it was started in 2007, the amount actually has remained the same for the last 11 years. And we're very proud to say that we have not been a painful draw on city resources and not had to go back and ask for additional funds. We look for other ways of raising revenue. Talk about services provided by the EDC. One of the things that we spend a lot of time on is business retention. Working with companies that are already here in the community, and I always say that our best companies are our competitors' best prospects. And so making sure that they have what they need to be successful, that any issues that they encounter are addressed very quickly. And so we're very proud of the work that we do with business retention, and it's work that all of our staff does. We also do business attraction. That's attracting new capital investment, new jobs to the community. We work with the state of Missouri and local groups to work with incentive programs that may be out there and available to companies looking to expand and add employment. We have a pretty extensive real estate market data and listings database. That is usually the thing where most companies start when they're looking at an expansion or relocation. They're looking for real estate. And so we keep a fairly extensive database of all commercial properties on our website at inedc.biz. We do a lot of business startup assistance and counseling, and this is something we started with the incubator back in 2010. Just looking at numbers, we see about 600 new business startups walk through our door or call us during the course of a year. Because we were one of the first incubators in the Kansas City Metro, we're kind of considered kind of the grandfather and the one that has the most expertise in this area. And so we get a lot of questions about how do I start a business, what are the processes, and so our staff has really over the years gotten to be very experts at helping start up businesses. We do a lot of customized demographic reports, so when somebody is looking at a location, we're able to provide them with data of the demographics of that area, whether it be drive times or walk times. For example, 1, 3, 5 miles or even 5, 10, 15 minutes. We can give them very specific data to let them know that that area may be a good viable location for their business. We also do an annual business recognition awards program. We'll do that in April of 2019. And we also coordinate a leadership exchange program, which I know several of you have gone on in the past. In 2019, actually February 7th and 8th, we'll be taking a bus trip to Washington, Missouri to look at them. They are a Main Street community that has done very well, and we want to kind of learn from their successes and bring some of those ideas back from that trip. Performance measures. I'm very big on measuring what we do and making sure we're delivering the services that are required, not only the city contract, but that we're expected to do to our membership and our board of directors. While the EDC itself does not create jobs, and I'll make that very clear, we don't create jobs and we don't make capital investment. It is a measurement that we use to track and help understand if what we're doing is building a strong business climate here in Independence. So each year we track annual measures in the area of jobs created, private capital investment, business assists, which are individual contacts that we make with businesses. So if we get a phone call needing assistance or somebody walks in our door, that's what we call a business assist. And then we look at how all those things kind of wrap together, impact employment and unemployment numbers. We also looked at some longer term measures back in 2015. We wanted to achieve those kind of in a 5-year window, looking at kind of a broader picture of what we do in economic development and make sure that over that 5 years we're kind of reaching some bigger goals. Some of those goals included increasing median household income to $50,000. We wanted to see 60,000 residents in Independence who were gainfully employed. And we also wanted to see the city's population grow. Those kind of things will grow our economy. We'll put more sales tax flowing through the city and helping support city services. And so those are things we watch very closely to understand if what we're doing is having some level of success and there's certainly outcomes that our staff works every day to try to achieve. So just for 2018, I'll give you a little bit of a kind of a report card of the tracking that we've done. So far, there's been 32 completed projects that we've been involved with. Those projects have resulted in about 659 new jobs created. We've had 65 jobs retained, and when we say retained, those were companies that were at risk of leaving the community. We've been able to keep them here either through a variety of methods. In most cases, it's finding them real estate to help them with an expansion. We've had about $25.6 million in private capital investment, and so far through the first 3 quarters, we've had 713 business contacts by our staff of 4.5 people. And by the end of this quarter, the end of the fourth quarter in our year-end report, we'll see all those numbers jump up a little bit more. Show you a few graphs. I'm big into charts and numbers and tracking that kind of information, and certainly I think an excellent measure of economic success is what is happening with median household income. The more we can raise that number, the more money that flows through our economy, and it increases the opportunities to attract retailers who have specific thresholds for what they're looking at when they locate in communities. It also brings a higher quality of life for our residents when they're making more money, obviously, and that's important. So I think this ties very closely to issues of workforce skills enhancement. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But we've seen household income grow by 17% in the last 5 years. And this year we actually hit our goal a couple of years early of exceeding $50,000 in median income. But I think one of the staggering figures, if you go back to about 2000 and look at 2000 through 2012, during those 13 years prior, we actually had a growth of 15% combined for all of those years. I mean, we went through a recession, we went through a downturn in the economy, but we have made incredible gains in just the last 3 years since we kind of set that goal. And now we are looking at reestablishing that goal, and our new goal now that we'll put into our 2019 plan will be raise the median income to $56,000 by 2023. Here's another graph that we track, which is unemployment, and I think this is one of the more interesting graphs, because if you look at it, and we go back about 4 years, if you look at 2014, 2015, when we start out in January, we're at the exact same number both those years. And then you go to 16 and 17 in January, and we're at 5.6%. So we stayed stable for a couple of years at 7.4. We dropped to 5.6 for a couple of years. We dropped to 5.10 in January of this year. And our last figure, which is October, is 2.9% unemployment in Independence. This is a remarkable number. Independence historically has had a fairly high unemployment rate compared to state averages. What this tells us is that most people that are able to work and want to work are working right now. There's still a handful of people out there that are unemployed, but this is an incredible number, but it's also impacting our ability to find workers from all of our employers, and I'll talk about that in just a moment as well. And here's the employment figure, and this is also kind of a historic graph, looking back to January of 14 and moving forward. And you can see back in 2014, we were about 53,000 Independence residents who were gainfully employed. Back in July of this year, we hit 57,578, and that's the highest number we have ever had in the history of Independence in terms of number of people who were employed. Now, we dropped off a little bit, and usually that happens in August when kids who are working summer jobs go back to school. But now we're starting to see it tick up again as we get into the last number in October, and we're at 57,186. Now, we've set a goal of hitting 60,000 in terms of total employment. That's going to be a real hard number to hit if we don't find ways to grow population. So it goes back to that third piece of what our long-range goals are, is growing population, and that's going to come, I think, with additional housing opportunities in our community. We've got to have more housing to attract more population into the community. And here's a little bit of commercial real estate data, and I promise I won't bombard you with very many more graphs or figures and all that, but this is the product we have to sell. When we look at industrial, retail, and office space, and you can kind of see by the graph, and this goes back a little bit farther, but back in 2012, we had office vacancy rates over 20%. We had a lot of empty office space. Ever since then, it's kind of gone on a downward trend, which is a good sign. But our biggest concern, I think, right now, we have retail space. When a retailer comes to us, we have a number of spaces we can show them. Usually we can find something that fits them. Same thing with office. We've got a variety of office spaces. What we don't have is industrial. Industrial vacancy right now is at 4%, and if you really break down that 4% and look at the numbers, most of the industrial space that falls in that 4% is either extremely small, but most all of it is extremely old, extremely outdated, and really not set up for advanced manufacturing. So we get a lot of lookers, but after they see the property, in most cases they move on to another community because it's not very modern, and so it's not very efficient, and in most cases it's not what more advanced manufacturing companies are looking for. I'll hit on the Innovation Center a little bit in the Business Incubator. I briefly mentioned this as one of the services that we provide. We did open this in 2010, and this year we welcomed our 200th client into the building. This facility right now has 33 businesses that work in the kitchen portion of the incubator, and we have 11 businesses on the second floor, which are what we call our biz tech offices. These companies have a total of 124 employees as of today. They pay about $2.7 million in wages annually, and their economic impact in the community is about $3.82 million. They're all very small companies. Some of them are single proprietor companies, but they are certainly making an impact. And we're always proud to see our companies graduate, and even prouder when they stay in the community. Here, just in the last few weeks, we've had 2 graduates, Rose's Fireside Salsa and My Village Grill. Both of those companies lease space in Independence following their graduation, one on 23rd Street and another on 291. My Village Grill opened up a restaurant there on 291. So glad to see the graduates staying in our community. That was one of the goals when we opened the incubator. After they graduate, we can't always control where they go, but we certainly want to have the opportunity to show them what's available in the community that raised them. And then an update on the Digital SANDBOX program. This was a program that we launched in 2016. We had CDBG funding from the City of Independence, and also a grant from the Missouri Technology Commission. And so far, we've assisted 13 companies with our InTech program, and we've funded 5 grants so far to assist companies getting closer to commercializing their product ideas. We still have some funds remaining. We have about $40,000 left in our combined funds, and so we can fund probably at least 2 more tech startups through the Digital SANDBOX program, and we are continuing to take applications for funding through the Digital SANDBOX KC website. So now I get to move into kind of the future and what we're looking at for 2019. So right now we're kind of working on our plan of action. You know, we pay very close attention to the Independence for All plan. It's a little bit of we feel like we had some involvement in helping make that reality, and so we feel like we have some responsibility in carrying out some of the items within that plan. So as we look at our action plan annually, we try to address areas that we think are impacting economic growth or limiting the economic growth within the community. And we try to find the areas where the EDC can be supportive. And sometimes it's a supporting role, sometimes it's a leading role. So first and foremost is workforce. And you can talk to any employer in this community right now, and the number one issue they will tell you is that they are having trouble finding workers. Sometimes it's trouble finding workers who are reliable. In a lot of cases, it's finding workers that have the skills that they need to fill jobs that they have open right now. So I shared with you earlier about employment figures, and one other figure that's a little startling is the next 5 years, about 20% of our workforce is eligible for retirement. You know, that means 12,000 people potentially could leave the workforce over the next 5 years. So that's a lot of experience that would have to be replaced within our workforce. And as a community, I think we've got to be prepared to train the workforce of the future and make sure that we connect to our schools, our community colleges, all those resources out there, and especially the ISD Academies program. I think that's such an incredible opportunity to connect businesses to the workforce of the future, get them engaged, get them involved with internships for those kids, because if they can do that, there's a lot of value to them, because they're going to be, you know, once these kids kind of see what kind of jobs there are in the community, you know, they're going to have a chance to work side by side, and I think as they get out of high school, or if they get out of college and want to come back to the community, they'll see there are jobs available for them. So, you know, working in partnership with our local businesses, you know, we want to put more businesses on the track of being involved with the Academies program. We also want to be able to highlight the kind of jobs that are available, and that's sometimes the challenge we have in this community, because much of our industrial is not visible. It's underground. We have 15 million square foot of underground space throughout the community, and most people don't realize there are a lot of good-paying jobs that you just don't drive by every day and see. They are in the underground spaces. And so one of the things in talking with some of our industrial companies throughout the community is they feel like people don't understand what they do and the type of jobs that they offer. So we are going to have a video crew in here after the first of the year, and they're actually going to create short videos that are kind of explainer videos showing the type of work that they do and the kind of jobs that are available. So we can build a library that we can share with the schools and we can put on our websites and say, you know what, here's the kind of jobs in this community, and here's what's required of you to fill these jobs, so they can kind of get a better feel without, sometimes we can't take people into manufacturing locations for safety reasons. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of prime them a little bit on what the opportunities might be. And so this is an idea that kind of developed out of just talking with our local industries about how we help them with their workforce efforts. We're also working towards being a Missouri Certified Workforce Ready community. This is something that is geared to assess the skills of our workforce and provide them with a certification of their skills. So they complete an assessment test, and they can actually take a credential and go to an employer and say, I am certified and skilled in these particular areas. We need 200 employees to participate on this. And when I say community, the state of Missouri looks at it from a county-wide level. Right now, we've got just over 60 companies who have signed up to be partners on this, but we've got to get over 200 to be a certified community. One thing this does, it gives us an incredible advantage because now we can actually certify our workforce. And I'll tell you, the number one question we get from companies looking to come into independence, it isn't about incentives, it's not about utilities, it's about our workforce and how do we quantify that. And so the Certified Work Ready Community Program will help us do that. And so it's a very important thing. And so I ask you to, as you talk to companies, if they're not involved with the program, have them get in contact with us so we can give them more information about that. Well, with industrial vacancy at 4%, we need development-ready sites to support new industrial development. And so we see numerous projects we just can't compete for because we don't have what we call shovel-ready sites to put these companies in. So we continue working with developers. There's a lot of opportunities, especially in the Little Blue Valley. But we haven't opened an industrial park in Independence since the 1970s. We are way overdue. And so we are working very hard to kind of make that happen. Again, working with developers and property owners in the Little Blue Valley. It's challenging. Everyone thinks the Little Blue Valley is an easy place to develop, but there's a lot of floodplain in the valley. So finding larger parcels of land and bigger areas for a light industrial park are very difficult to do, but we're dedicated to that, and we're going to make sure we get that done. Opportunity Zone. You've probably heard a little bit about this, and earlier this year we submitted and were approved for the establishment of an Opportunity Zone which covers much of Northwest Independence. Our next steps now are to determine what areas are best suited for development. So we look at areas within this designated Opportunity Zone boundary and we try to see where are the redevelopment opportunities. And when you look at Northwest Independence, there are a number of places where we can do redevelopment, obviously around the square, along Truman Road, along 24 Highway. What we're wanting to do is put together a comprehensive list of where those opportunities are and then make sure that the Opportunity Zone funds being created across the nation are aware of what the opportunities are and that we attract some of the dollars into Independence. So we're pulling all that together right now. We'll be posting that on our website, but also doing a distribution. Right now, there are about 160 Opportunity Zone funds. There are several $1 billion that have been designated for that. And essentially what an Opportunity Zone does, it allows for the deferral of taxes on gains for investments made in Opportunity Zones. But you've got to hold on to the property for 10 years. So the nice thing about it is it really encourages somebody to be a long-term investor in an area versus coming in very quickly, investing the money, and then getting out with the profits. So it requires them to stay there for a period of 10 years. And then also, we plan to really expand our business retention program. As I said earlier on, we work very hard with our existing businesses, and I'm proud to say, you hear about it in the news where companies are hopping state lines for incentives. I think around this room, we can safely say there's not been a lot of independence companies leave us, and that's because we do work very hard at business retention and making sure our companies have what they need to stay in independence and be successful. We are going to implement what's called a synchronous assessment tool. That assessment tool is really kind of an interview that we'll do with companies, and we combine the information of all these interviews to identify trends within companies. So, for example, if one company is having a certain issue, it's very likely that a lot of companies are having the issue, and so we can work as a community to kind of address those things and develop strategies to help them resolve the issues they may be having. And then just a few final items. We certainly want to work with the city to develop an incentive policy that can uniformly be applied to projects. When we are asked about incentives right now, we have to say it's dependent on really a number of factors. We need to outline those factors, understand how we apply incentives, who qualifies for them, and quite frankly, if we aren't raising the bar in terms of median household income, it needs to be a win-win for the community and the company as well. It doesn't make sense to incentivize jobs that don't move the needle. And so I think when we put that policy together and we worked with Mr. Randall and hopefully in the next few weeks we'll come to the council with a policy that we can discuss. I think it will be an item where we can have something to market. And we get that question all the time when companies call us saying, well, tell me what incentives are available. And it's really on a case-by-case basis, and that's not the answer they really want. They want to know if I do this, what's available for me. And right now we don't have that, so having a policy in place would be great. And then also, we want to create a kind of a couple of sector-specific groups. Almost every company now, technology touches them in one shape or another. We're going to create a technology council. During a recent trip to Nashville, we met with the Nashville Technology Council and saw what they were doing. And, it's interesting in Nashville that, you think of Nashville and their economy and you think that country music is a big part of it. What's about, $6 billion? And I think technology is $30 billion. So technology touches kind of every business that's out there. And so we're already starting to see this a little bit right now with the mayor's workforce cabinets. We have a group that is kind of focusing on technology and entrepreneurship. And we're going to kind of help them launch and just kind of have a continued conversation. The other area that we're going to work on is craft brewers. And all of a sudden we've had a huge surge of craft brewers. We have Evansfield Distillery. We have the Three Trails Brewing up on the square. We have Polly's Pop. That's a craft soda. And certainly I know Mr. Van Camp has been involved with those projects. And we want to have them talking as well and talking about how we how they can work together and do some great things here in this community, because I think they're just the start of some other very unique things that are going to happen. And then finally, I'll mention makerspace. And really, what these craft brewers are, they're makers. And it seems like we are a community of makers. And with the Innovation Center, we have so many people who come to us because they have an idea, they have a concept, they have a recipe that they want to launch. And so the idea of a makerspace has been floating around for the last couple of years. We got to figure out a way to do this, because we've got people out there with woodworking skills, with metal smithing skills, with graphic arts skills, but they don't have a place. They don't have a place where they can take an incredible skill and an incredible talent and turn that into a viable business. And so I know it's certainly been a priority of the mayor, and we've looked at that in various communities. We looked at that in Nashville. I want to see if we can figure out a way to make that happen in 2019. And then finally, I just want to extend a word of thanks. I know a few weeks ago there was action taken to reduce commercial electric rates here in Independence. This has certainly been an issue we've heard about a lot over the last couple of years. I think it's a good first step, and I want to applaud the council for taking those actions. We've got to be competitive. Utilities will always come up in the discussion at some point in time, especially when we're doing attraction of a company or retaining a company. And so I always say after raw materials and employee expenses, utilities are number 3 expense. And so we've got to be competitive in that area. So I appreciate your work in helping us bring down those rates and giving us a little more to play with there. So glad to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Well, believe it or not, I have a few, even though I say
Can't
you're
believe
bored.
it.
But I always learn something, so thank you. I appreciate you coming. Business retention, which you talked about a lot, and I think we all sort of understand that the best economic development you can do is to not lose. But could you talk a little bit more about specifically, and I know this is a big part of what Jody does, is working with our existing businesses, but maybe, give us some ideas of what are these issues that maybe come up that that cause people to start looking, and how do you find out about that? Do they contact you and say we're we're
Yeah.
talking about leaving, or can you get into that a little bit more, because I know that's a huge part of it.
I think the biggest thing about it is you have to develop a relationship with your companies in your community. Because if you have that relationship, before they even think about leaving, they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to call you. It's just like having a friendship. Before something changes in that friendship, they're probably going to pick up the phone and have that conversation with you. And so when, for example, probably the biggest issue we have is sometimes when a company is needing to grow. I mean, they are bursting at the seams. They've got business that they can't fulfill. They usually come to us and say, okay, I need a bigger space. I need more room. Can you help me find a building? It's really about having that open dialogue with the company to be able for them to openly tell us, here's my challenges in independence. Here's what's keeping me from growing. Here's what I need to be successful. Can you help me? And then we try to find the resources and find the information they need. And sometimes it's a building. Right now with the way the building market is for commercial buildings, we ask people to hold on. We're working to get a business park done. And so do what you can. Most of our businesses, they're here for a reason, because they love this community. Relocating a business is extremely difficult because when you have to shut down production, relocate, bring production back up, not all your employees go with you, it is very painful. It is very expensive. So it's the last thing that most companies want to do. And we've been fortunate to be able to have a very open dialogue, and companies willing to come to us when they have an issue that needs to be addressed, and we've had some success with our business retention.
You mentioned Independence for All. I just want to say you were very humble in saying you had a little bit to do with that. You certainly had a lot to do with that. The Economic Development Corporation, your members, your board in developing that, and we appreciate you taking that seriously and helping us to achieve those goals. The median income and population growth, 56 by 23 doesn't have the same ring as 50 by 20, but I get asked this question a lot, and I think the council does as well as the staff, is, okay, you met that goal, but what did you really have to do with it? I mean, and I never really quite know how to answer that question myself, other than to say, we've created an environment that people want to be in. But how do you measure how much of an impact all of us who are involved with economic development, whether at the EDC or at the city, really helped move that needle? Or is that just kind of one of the statistics that we take credit for, but we didn't have a lot of impact on?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's kind of the culmination of everything that we do to create a business environment. It's what the council does when they take actions on different things. It's what we do when we're working with existing businesses. It's what we do when we try to attract businesses. We want to attract quality businesses. We don't want to attract people who are going to hire people at $9 an hour. That doesn't move the needle. We don't want to give incentives to companies who don't move the needle. And so our measure is, if people are making more money in this community, that is going to raise the bar for everyone. That is going to reduce the issue with social services. It's going to reduce the issue with late utility payments. All those things go into that. And I'm trying to remember the number off the top of my head, but for every $1 million or for $1,000 of median income, the economic impact in the community is several $1 million. For just $1,000 of median income change, it's several $1 million. And from a taxing standpoint, and seeing that money roll over in the community, and with this community relying so much on sales tax, what that means to your general fund sales taxes is significant. And if we don't find a way to make that number continue to increase, I don't see a lot of huge tax increases in the future anywhere, not in Independence, just anywhere. So what you've got to do is you've got to draw more money into your community. And so it's a hard question to answer, no doubt about it, but it is truly, I think, the culmination of what we've been trying to accomplish, and a measure that we can say, okay, have we been successful or not? And if that number keeps going up at a higher percentage than what we've seen historically, then I think we're doing our job.
Okay, last question. I actually don't know if I've ever heard you say that the private investors have grown from 35 to 200 since
Correct.
2007?
That is correct.
How, that's amazing. I didn't realize it was that kind of growth. So what do you, I mean, obviously, like you say, you've put a big focus on that, but what do you attribute that interest from the business community, especially the development community, to want to come over here and be investors?
Yeah, I think previously, I think it wasn't something that was a focus. It was just one of those things. If somebody wanted to join, sure, here's an application, we'll take your money. But we didn't actively, and for us, we call them investors. We don't call them members because, quite frankly, they are partners in what we do in economic development. So we have banks, and we have contractors, and we have partners who help us do projects. Every one of our investors, we have a lot of different investors in different sectors, but we really focus on the ones who, quite frankly, can bring value to the organization by their skills and expertise. Because when I have a prospect in the room and I need a contractor, I can pull from our pool of investors and say, you know what? We've got 4 or 5 of them that are really good. They know what they're doing. They've been highly successful. They can help you get the job done. And so for us, it's really just, it's not so much about money as it is about just having that knowledge in the room to kind of help support what we do in economic development.
I have one more question to say. I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think is the most important thing for this council to do to continue to spur economic development?
I only get one.
Okay, 2. Or however many you want, within reason.
We've got to figure out a way to do a business park in Independence. We've got developers out there who will build buildings, even on a speculative basis, which is really hard to get. But nobody is going to, I always say, in a lot of communities, sometimes you've got to do things yourself. If we think a developer is going to come in here and from the ground up build us a state-of-the-art business park, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to take a public-private partnership to make that happen. So that's number one. I would say number 2 is electric rates. Number 2 is electric rates. We've got to get a handle on that. As a municipally owned utility, if we can't be competitive, and I'm not talking about KCP&L, I'm talking about other municipally owned utilities because that is our competition. If we can't be competitive with them, we should not be in the electric business. So I'll say that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councilman?
Thanks. I wanted to thank you, Tom, and the rest of the EDC staff. I have referred a number of people to you over the past several years, and I appreciate your contact and your contacts in talking with those companies and those folks that I've referred to you. I think of you as kind of an ombudsman, so a go-between between private and public to help bring businesses here or keep businesses here, because some of those businesses were ready to leave. So I appreciate your position and your knowledge base and helping to keep some of those businesses here. So I think you provide a vital role. That's why I'm one of your investors.
Yes.
as my business. So not as a council person, but as a private owner of a dental practice, I have felt like it was important for me to be involved in that. And I know we've as a council, tried to help spur the development of this industrial park. I don't think we're there yet. I don't know if you want to comment on that. I know that's still in the works. You're still trying to work out some deals with that.
Yeah.
But I think we still got to reach out. We still have to make other contacts because obviously it's not working where we are now. But thank you. I wanted to publicly thank you for what you've done. So.
Well, thank you, Dr. Robertson. I'll tell you, I think the one thing that makes it work in Independence is that we have a really good, good dialogue and a good relationship between the EDC, between the council, between city staff. We just work together really well. And I'll tell you, in communities where that doesn't happen, economic development doesn't work very well. And I think in Independence it works very well. And I've talked to many of you on different occasions privately about economic development, and I appreciate all of your interest in that. And my door is always open, and I'm always glad to, I'm always open to new ideas. I don't have all the answers. I think between all of us, we do.
Okay, yes.
I too thank you, and have worked with you on several occasions on different companies. but this is our rates are reflective of a nationwide upswing in the economy and in the unemployment and in the median range. But your data must be, I mean, I've come to you for several things, but this seems to be something that, where do you get it?
Most of it comes from the Missouri Economic Research Institute, which is part of the Department of Economic Development. So they track all the employment, unemployment numbers. ESRI is where we get a lot of the demographic data relating to median income. So there's a lot of third-party sources that are out there that we are. It's not any numbers that we do. It's just numbers we kind of follow and track from certified sources.
So, and I don't mean this to be, but the negatives on this, people who do leave, do we have records? I mean, I know that you keep close correspondence with people that are here and how they work, but the people who leave, do we have a offset?
Yeah, we know why companies leave. We understand. Sometimes there's
No, I meant the data.
Yes.
Can we say where it's growing and where it's, I mean.
Oh, in terms of sectors?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, the biggest growth sector right now is healthcare. Healthcare far and away is our number one growth sector, and look around. We're an aging population, unfortunately, and the need for healthcare. We have several new skilled living, assisted living facilities are being built. Cedarhurst will open here just after the start of the year. I've done so many support letters for certificate of needs to the state of Missouri for these different facilities that healthcare is a big issue, and that's great because healthcare jobs are high-paying jobs. They provide good benefits. I know the program that they've done using CDBG money with Community Services League to help get people trained with CNA is really important. I mean, that is a really good use of money because it prepares those people for jobs that are coming at us fast and furious. If you talk to Centerpoint Medical Center, they'll tell you they can't hire nurses fast enough.
That's epidemic around.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge, and people tell you on the education side of it, is there's not enough instructors to instruct all the people that are coming through there want to get nursing degrees. That's the challenge right now. That's the gap.
Right, but that's always, I mean, there's a lawyer for every 3 people in the United States, but they don't practice law.
Yes, that's
They
true.
do other things. Same things with nurses. Some of them can't keep their license. Some of them don't practice nursing.
It's hard work too, and some of them decide that's not the right thing for them.
Exactly. Well, my wife did 22, 25, some years in the business, so I'm well aware of it. But it's an up and coming. I mean, it's there. It's just like truck drivers. A third of them don't pass the test. That's why there's not enough truck drivers.
Yeah.
There's a third of them don't drive a truck. The third that's left can't cover what we need.
Right.
So it looks like we get a catch-22 every time we do a step ahead. We don't have shovel-ready place. We need a shovel-ready place.
Yeah.
That's one of the important things. And I know that I'd like to congratulate this council, and even more so than you did, and well, you did well. I'm not trying to, but 2% across the board should be an incentive everywhere. I mean, that's reaching out. And I don't want to make too much of it, but has it ever been done before? No.
I can't remember any community going backwards on rates, so
Thank
yes,
you.
it's
Thank you.
certainly it's yeah.
So that should say to people,
Yeah.
and your status of having an approved program for business to come here. I can see the range, but we work with people that want to come here.
Yep.
We bend over. And you're one of the fine examples of how we come, and we will fit ourselves to what is needed for people to come here.
Yes.
Thanks again for your approval.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next is our Rockwood redevelopment study. Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, members of the council, as the council will recall, last November, the city acquired the former Rockwood Golf Course consisting of some 91 acres in partnership with MC Power, 30-year lease to utilize 29 of those acres for a community solar farm at 8.5 megawatt solar farm. But that left us over 60 acres with an exceptional redevelopment opportunity really in the heart of our city. So a lot of different ideas were coming forward. We decided to get strategic with the support of the City Council and your council goals funding. We engaged the firm BNIM Architecture, internationally recognized firm, to come and help us brainstorm and put some real strategic thought behind what potential uses may make sense for that area as we continue to engage the community and in particular the neighborhood in the future land use of that area. So tonight we are pleased to introduce to the council Steve McDowell and Sam DeJong, both from BNIM Architecture. I'd invite them both forward now to share some of their findings with the council.
Thank you.
Good evening. Sorry. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Steve McDowell, and Sam DeYoung is here with me. We're very excited to be here tonight. I grew up in Independence, played golf on the golf course as a kid, and went to middle school at Clifford H. Nowlin. So it was really a great opportunity to come back. Don't live too far away. My mom still lives very close. We began the process last spring. We worked closely with the mayor, with Councilman Tom Van Camp, in the city manager's office, as well as MC Power, to develop the strategies that we brought forward today. And, oops. Yeah, so really beginning with your own vision statement for being America's greenest city, which I think it's actually really nice to follow the last two presentations. Our office has been involved in the green movement, the sustainable design movement, really throughout our history. And one of the strategies that we started working with probably 25 years ago was called the triple bottom line. And what it was is if you made the right decisions for people and you made the right decisions for the planet, then those decisions would lead to the right decisions for the economy. So people, planet, and prosperity. And so just listening to both previous presentations really kind of, in a way, set up the strategies that we've been working on since we started last spring. And that, so really, beginning with your vision and then maybe adding a little bit of our history to it. Sorry, it's hard to know which way to look. But at any rate, so thinking about, how we build a plan that's based on the community, based on where the city is planning to go and the city wants to go, and actually based on some of the good news that we've heard tonight in terms of median income, in terms of jobs, in terms of the need for additional housing. And so thinking about how we take a piece of property in the middle of neighborhoods, a piece of property that has a lot of positive energy about it in terms of a new school being built up the street, things that are going on in Independence, and thinking about how to leverage that property. But before we do that, we have to really start thinking about what's already there. What's the community like that's there? And I'm not going to try to get you to look at all those photographs, but I'll just bear with me. The top photographs are kind of the northern edge of Westport Road and the housing and all that's up there. Those on the east side are really about the eastern edge of the property, the housing, the schools. The south edge is housing, and then the west really talks about the housing typologies, the church, and those other elements that make those areas up. And so that's just part of our process of trying to understand what already makes this place around it special and how to really build on that and leverage it. We also pulled economic data, some we received from the city, others that we pulled together. And the good news is just like you heard in the last presentation, the trends are positive. One thing that wasn't mentioned is that this neighborhood is getting younger. The families that are moving in, it's a high percentage, high 60s, low 70s of owner occupancy, which is always a good sign. But the area is on the upswing. And the school, of course, is maybe, I think, actually when we first had the very first conversation and learned that there was a new school under construction, well, school districts always know what's going to happen. And so that was a real clear indication to us that there's an opportunity that's different for this property than exists today. And we've worked on other golf course, urban golf courses, and have, learned that, you look at a golf course and a lot of people say nature. Well, that's really not true. There's a lot of chemicals, there's a tremendous amount of water. The grasses usually are great for playing golf, but they're really not great to attract birds and insects and the other critters that make an ecosystem work, nor are they necessarily really that good for people. And so, you see these images and you really think about the opportunity to connect people back to nature again, to really create places that are vibrant ecological systems that people want to be in and that give back and or contribute to the overall health and well-being of the place. Back to the first presentation of how you really measure the health of the people of Independence. The first place to start is the water system. The water system that's there today, the water you see today is not the natural system. It was changed, it was modified both on the site of the golf course to make the golf course work, and then it's been modified greatly by the development that's upstream. Every time a house is built, a driveway is built, a street is built, it changes the water system. It changes how the aquifer underneath the ground that you don't see gets recharged with every rain. It changes how what you do see performs, and sometimes what you see during a storm event is not what you like because it starts flooding as it does down towards 23rd Street or into the park, Hill Park. And so thinking about how we can create a place that values the water and treats and in a way makes the water act more naturally in the future. Oops. Oh, sorry. I'm going to have a hard time. I'm not good with equipment. It's hard to see, but those light green areas that populate the map are indications that this was largely a forested area. Most of back prehistory, before it was occupied, before the 3 trails. And think about, that one of the opportunities is to bring some of that back, bring back the forest, the prairies. This really wasn't prairie in this part of the country, a few miles west, and it's more prairie and less forest. But this was a pretty heavily forested area. Thinking about how we bring back some of that ecological system to help, we'll never restore all of the ecologies, but regenerate healthy ecologies that create places that connect people to nature and places that people want to be. And I come back to that because it's a way of creating economic value and economic activity. It's a place of creating long-term stability for the property owners that are already here, that have already committed to this place, but for those that might come in the future. And so thinking about this as a redevelopment project that is really grounded on people and grounded on economic development and grounded on sustainability, green cities, however you want to frame that. So then thinking about, there's a tremendous amount of trail systems throughout Independence, around the area. The Rock Islands will someday be right very, very close down by the stadiums. And thinking about how this site can be connected to those trail systems. So it's not just about making Rockwood a place that people want to be in, but making Rockwood a place that's connected to the other places in the community that people want to be in, to connect to nature, go to Inglewood and have fun, or go to the square, whatever it is. And then, again, I mentioned schools earlier, but Van Horn's not very far away. Clifford H. Nowlin's right next door. The new school up the street, I forgot its name, but
Castle Park.
Yeah, Castle Park. And so there's already a good infrastructure for families to be committed to the community. They already are, but reinforcement for future development. And then so we met with developers that work both in the Kansas City area as well as work in other places, and we asked them, what are your impressions? What do you? Not that we didn't have our ideas, but we wanted to kind of test our ideas with what people who might come here and be investors in the future in the redevelopment process. And as you can see, hopefully you can see it, they suggested that, in a way, the need for office space, commercial office space, workplace, like we heard just a few minutes ago. They suggested neighborhood retail that really serves the area. You know, places that, you know, if you live on 25th Street, you could walk to here for coffee or for food or for whatever, but places that really, it's not intended to be a destination that's going to attract folks from all over Independence on a regular basis, but really a place to serve the immediate community. You know, there's a grocery store in Sterling, but, you know, maybe it's a smaller grocery or something that's easy to walk to and, you know, kids can go to and so forth. Maybe Kurt's South or something like that. And thinking about, you know, the suggestion for different types of housing, single family, multifamily. And then the other thing that came up in the process was maybe there's an education recreation component. You know, and that could take a lot of different forms. Maybe it's an education component that's focused on the natural ecosystem, or maybe it's, I think the plans that we come back to show soccer fields and maybe some other kinds of outdoor recreation. That could take many different forms, but at any rate, that's kind of the early thinking about it. And then we asked the developers, so with those ideas in mind, what kind of incentives, what kind of help would you need in order to make a project like this happen if you were going to be the developer? And so that middle cost, so, you know, making the land affordable, some type of really strong city commitment to be behind it. That could also take the form of infrastructure development, you know, doing all of the streets and utilities and things like that to help entice folks to come here. Thinking about, you know, helping the surrounding neighbors to invest in their properties to ensure long-term success for all those folks. And then lastly, maybe some type of incentive packages. And then the last part is really just about phasing. And, you know, the phasing, no matter how good a phasing plan we do for a development like this, they always end up following the marketplace. And so, but the suggestion that the first thing would be a tenant, and or the opposite of that is the first thing is residential. Sometimes those two things go back and forth. Secondly, you know, the recreation component, you know, really creating formal and informal recreation to serve the neighborhood, the bigger neighborhood, the surrounding neighbors. And then lastly, the commercial activities. But again, all those things are fairly fluid and can change depending upon how, you know, the conditions at the time. So that the dark areas really start to talk about different ways, different pieces of land that can fairly effectively be developed versus the kind of the center. And I think our study led us to the conclusion that the most important part to preserve or to regenerate is a natural system, is that middle. And the reason is that's where the water is, and it's big enough that an ecological system can be regenerated that would attract natural, you know, animals and birds and things like that that are going to make it healthy. And then this is just a little bit further development on that. You know, just the first is on your all's right is a fairly conservative idea. The middle one starts to slide the northern development to the north, which lets it kind of creep out into that natural zone and make some place that would be really memorable and interesting. And I should also say that, you know, in all cases, there's development always starts in the kind of north quadrant, north end of the site. There's always housing development along Hardy, most likely all the way down to the school, to Nowlan. And then the one on your left suggests that maybe the solar farm should be picked up and put on the roofs of all the buildings, and that there would be it wouldn't be literally picked up and put on the roofs, but we would use rooftop solar panels rather than a farm. So we'd end up with a village that had still generated the same amount of power or maybe more. And MC is very much in line with this idea. They like the idea very much. And so we give the land back to the city. The city then has the opportunity to generate more income off of that property, especially that southern property. If anybody has any questions or anything along the way, don't worry. I'm used to changing directions. So this is, and I forgot to say this early on. So where we are is this is, we're still making a sausage. You guys are watching us as we work. And then we'll continue to develop the designs, and you see things like the solar farms missing out of the rendering, which Sam and I just noticed that 10 minutes ago. But it was just an accident in the rendering, so it should still be there. But we'll be developing, assuming you guys are in line with where we are, we'll be developing, further refining the design and developing more beautiful renderings and more compelling renderings. And then with that information, developing kind of the final package that'll be used for the developer community to take a look at. I should have said that at the very beginning. I apologize for that. And so this starts to show you kind of the diagram. North is up. That the yellow areas represent commercial and retail. The larger orange U-shaped buildings are mixed-use buildings. So they could be retail, restaurants, things like that on the first floor, and apartments up above. The red areas along on your left side along Hardy represent single-family, row homes, or things like that. And then kind of the green area in the center is that area that would be preserved, regenerated, turned into the more naturalized zone. And within it would be the education component and the recreation component. So when you're out with your family doing things, you'd be in amidst this regenerated natural landscape. And then that we probably should have reversed these. So the center section, the light green in the middle between the two waterways, including the waterways, is really that regenerated landscape. It could look like the photographs on your left. And so kind of I'm unbundling the projects. So the very north end is where the professional offices, the office building would be located right at Hardy and Westport Road. And it could look something like the buildings in the renderings. And then the retail is to the west and south of that. And again, it could slip underneath, depending upon the market. It could slip underneath the mixed-use residential buildings. And then those mixed-use buildings set atop that kind of plinth. And then to the south are those row homes or single-family homes that really are meant to kind of mediate as you go to the housing on the east side of Hardy to kind of connect to that neighborhood across the street. And, the details not in these drawings, but we're thinking, there's no sidewalk on Hardy now, but making it a very walkable, comfortable street, kind of dealing with the water problem that exists there as part of the design solution. And imagine it probably more by a naturalized stream that would be both beautiful when it's dry and as well as when there's a rain event. And then that nature education center kind of sits right in the middle, kind of at the north end of the naturalized landscape and at the south end of the village or the town. And then, as I mentioned, phasing, this is one idea about the phasing. So really starting on the left, starting with that kind of commercial piece at the very northern tip at the intersections of Hardy and Westport Road, and then migrating south, and then kind of filling out the east and the west wings, and then really kind of completing the central portion of the education piece in the last phase. And there's probably a number of ways to get there, and then kind of back to that view. So we're looking from the north, across the property, across the village, towards the heart of the site. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Comments and questions from the council? Yes, Councilman?
So thank you very much for being with us this evening, and thanks for your thoughtful drawings and ideas. You know, I was sitting here, like many of us, my mind wanders a little bit to other possibilities. So, you know, one of the things you mentioned, which isn't in the drawings yet, but probably will be because these are just conceptual, and that is some of the trails and some of the connections that we would want to have probably along Hardy because of the schools, but also along Westport Road that might go up to the stadiums and connect with the Rock Island eventually. And then perhaps on over to the park, Hill Park, or down to the little Rotary Park, which is right down past Rock Creek there, and then on up to Inglewood. Inglewood's not very far away. So the park connection, maybe some trailheads where they would come together, and some trails then into the property, to the waterways or to the interior. The other thing I was thinking about was because of the nature that's here, one of the important things is for community and for people to come together for let's say some sort of a garden area, a common garden area, maybe a greenhouse.
And I didn't show the, actually.
And perhaps a greenhouse where everybody could garden some in the winter.
Yeah.
Or a greenhouse, commercial greenhouse that could that could actually produce some. But I think having some sort of a food place, a store, a food store, or a small grocery store, or something is going to be essential to seeing development occur in this area. And then there has to be other enticements. So one of the enticements that I was thinking in terms of, since we have the solar farm here, down the road, eventually, if and when battery development gets to that point, this particular neighborhood and the neighborhood surrounding would have the benefit of having backup power that the rest of the city might not have.
Absolutely.
If there was batteries there for some of our power storage and generation. So some of those enticements, I think, need to be built into the area, because right now it's going to be hard to get commercial development to come in there. So we have to think of ways that would be beneficial, that's going to benefit everybody, that's going to benefit people coming back to that area.
We totally agree. And I should have, there are greenhouses, so
there
you had a good idea. But, and the trails, all that will show up in the more, they probably, actually the trails were on the earlier versions, the hand-drawn versions, but when we switched to computers, they kind of lose a little bit for a while. But no, you're absolutely right. The battery idea is terrific. You know, the opportunity zone is only about 500 feet north of this site, and which is great for where it is, but I think it raises the challenge a little bit. And so we have to really think about how to raise the bar even higher, because it's such a wonderful piece of property.
So one of the comments you made, and I just wanted you to clarify because I wasn't sure I understood it correctly, the solar panels on roofs, if commercial buildings were built, you're talking about new commercial buildings, not building commercial buildings where the solar farm is and putting them on the roof.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing?
So the idea is that, you know, the solar panels have a life expectancy of, you know, some amount of time, and depending upon, well, first of all, those panels that are there could be picked up and reinstalled on the roofs on any new buildings that are built on the site.
Where the solar farm
where the solar farm is, or on the, if we built on the north end first and decided we could relocate some of those panels.
But it would accomplish the same thing. It would still be a farm. It would just be
it would just be up
placed
high,
on top of buildings.
and it would give back some land. And so the idea is not to build buildings to hold the solar. The idea is to, if you want to, you know, if this is so successful, that land that's on the south end could be more housing or whatever. One way to balance things out would be just to, in lieu of losing the solar, would be to reinstall it or install more up-to-date, you know, which it all, you know, whatever MC's depreciation schedule, I mean, it all, but at any rate, keep the solar alive. And including if need be, it could, if Missouri changes their legislation, it could be that distributed power could go on the roofs of the surrounding houses also and help those folks out, both with batteries and with panels. So.
I have a question. Does your contract allow you to perhaps look at the solar farm area itself to maybe soften the impact on the surrounding neighborhood?
I don't know that it does, but we could certainly talk to the city manager about that. So.
Like, I believe we paid $50,000. And if we told you tonight, okay, thank you very much, we don't want you to do any more, would you give us a refund?
Well, no,
I'm serious. I'm dead serious.
I don't think you've paid us $50,000 yet. You generally don't. We don't invoice our clients until we've completed our services, and so we haven't completed our services yet. So.
Okay. So are you going to be giving us a bill soon?
Well, I think we billed you partially. I don't know for sure. Have we?
Because I
Apparently
just
we
don't know
haven't.
how realistic
Yeah.
commercial and office and all that stuff is right now. And so I think this council should take a look to see if it's even realistic before we continue spending this kind of money.
I think the scope of the contract that was approved was what you've seen here tonight. I think this was the last deliverable, which was coming
Oh,
and
okay.
presenting to
Then
the
I
council.
misunderstood. And I do thank you very much. You've walked into a buzzsaw with me in Rockwood. Sorry about that.
No worries. Actually, I think we do owe you a little bit more. So we're gonna
Exciting.
deliver a little more. Whether
Great.
at least we believe we owe you a little more.
Perfect.
Well, I'm fortunate to be an optimist with a great imagination. So to me, this is exciting. And I think, one thing that we had talked about in our prior discussions and helping you kind of get a sense of what we were looking, or what we, felt would be a real asset to this neighborhood, was just a sense of the scale. And I think you showed us some overlays that we're talking about an area that's as large as the Independence Square or the Country Club Plaza. And I think, I drive by this golf course many times a week, and I don't really grasp the size of that. So it seems like a lot, but I think that was really helpful to give us some perspective.
Yeah, so in the north piece is more like, overall it is of the scale that the mayor mentioned. But the piece that we're showing developed is like a piece of Brookside, Central Brookside. So it's a very walkable, it's a fairly modest development. It's a little over 300,000 square feet of area of building total. A little more than half of that, probably about 70% of that is the housing. So it's largely a housing project, a residential project, with supporting retail and office and other uses.
So, to answer the Councilwoman's question, and I think, the question of the community is, where do we go from here? With these concepts and some, considerable amount of work that you've put in to sort of assess, the property. How do we take that next step and, try to work with a developer on some kind of concept that I think, captures what we hear in the 4th District from our neighbors who, we talked to about Rockwood and what they would like to see there, if indeed, they want to see development happen.
Right. So I mentioned earlier that we met with 3 or 4 developers. Craig actually handled that, and he's not here tonight. But that was really the litmus test. We did that at the very beginning before we really did anything, because if the development community wasn't interested in it, then we would have come back to the city and said, we're not sure we should proceed with this study. So at any rate, we received a pretty high level of interest of people that are actively doing things in the area. Now I'm not sure that any of them have projects underway in Independence right now, but at any rate, there are people that are doing things in Kansas City. I think all in Kansas, active in Kansas City. One maybe working in Lee Summit, but at any rate, so the really that was our first test to see if things were robust enough, if there was interest enough to proceed. I think, actually after hearing, is it Tim's presentation on EDC? Tom, yeah. I think we really need to sit down with him and understand what he's learning and how this project can help with that. Which we'll do within our current deliverable. So,
Thank you. Councilman?
cool.
Thank you very much for these ideas, and the possibilities that could be coming from this. I particularly like the nature reserve part of this. Making it a park is what I hear from my constituents, and that's got to be foremost in the project before anything else. That's what they were promised, kind of, and that's what we're gonna, have to give them. So the being sustainable and the economic value, whereas it's optimistic, and I really believe that it could possibly happen, but we have to have more substantial proof that situation could occur. Until then, we're going to maintain it and keep it as a park and give it to the people. But for the ideas, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. And I think one of the reasons to invest, or one of the ways to get to have a park that's really robust and beautiful and vital, because it takes money to create that, is to use the proceeds of the investment in the commercial development, the residential development to help fund that. So
Well, the part is that we own the park. We're renting to MC Power, who is a wonderful cooperative companion to this situation, but it is our park, and our land, and what's best for the citizens and what they want certainly has to develop. We have to hear from them and give them our ideas. Thank you. And, one of the other things is when you played that park, I did too, and they don't do much chemicals there. You hit off the water grass. You hit off the.
Well, that's,
so the contamination part, because of the aquifers too that wouldn't hold it, really is a kind of mute point. But I understand where you. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Great.
Okay, our final presentation this evening is the cost of service and rate study update. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, the resolution that was passed by the council a few weeks ago reducing the rates across the board also contained a provision that at tonight's meeting we would come and update the council on the cost of service study that's being conducted by Burns & McDonnell. So tonight Ted Kelly from Burns & McDonnell is here to provide the council with an update on the status of that initiative and where we go from here. So I will invite Mr. Martin forward at this time, or Kelly, sorry, pardon me.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to come and talk to you, Madam Mayor, and members of the council, to give you an update on where things stand currently in the rate study we're doing. I'm Ted Kelly, a Senior Project Manager of Regulatory Services at Burns McDonnell. I do have with me in the audience tonight our Principal Analyst that's working on the study, Sarah Ruckman. So she grew up in Independence, so is certainly concerned about what goes on as we move forward. Do want to give you the update. What I want to do very quickly is go over the rate study process itself, discuss financial planning, and then open things up for your questions. Where we are moving currently in the rate study process, it really is a three-step process. The first being the very key and principal portion of the study, and that's the financial planning portion. And that is looking at revenues that are being generated by current rates to your customers and other sources of revenue, comparing those to your revenue requirements, and identifying that financial plan, what types of adjustments need to be made. The second piece of that is the cost of service, which looks at the responsibility by class, analyzing the costs and allocating those costs by the type of service provided, the type of facilities that are in place for the different customer classes, and looking to see, are the customers paying their share of the cost to provide that service to them? And then the final piece is developing the proposed rates. Some of the factors that we need to consider that certainly are impacting utility rates here in Independence and across the country, customers are currently undertaking a lot of conservation efforts that are leading to lower revenues for systems. A lot of the utility costs we recognize are fixed costs, and they don't vary a lot with the utility product that's produced. There are increasing regulations that are impacting systems, and there's inflation on operating and capital costs. And certainly we are dealing with aging facilities and the need to renew those facilities and replace facilities over time. So when we look first at financial planning, our core assumptions take into account that within the city right now you have minimal customer growth. Our load forecast is currently including less than about 0.5% growth across the system. We took into account the master plan study that was recently completed but has not necessarily been acted on, but we needed to look at that plan and make sure we're incorporating the results of that in our forecasts. We're looking at the O&M expense for the system. We started with 2019 budget as our baseline, considering inflation of about 3.25% annually to those as we forecast forward. And then we've looked at the capital improvement plan that has been prepared by Independence Power and Light. Our preliminary forecast is currently nearing completion. We are working to identify additional revenue adjustments. We took into account the fact that you recently put through the 2% rate reduction. So we're trying to identify additional reduction opportunities. To do that, we have finished our preliminary forecast of your expenses and your revenues, but we're working with staff to identify, are there potential opportunities to reduce some of those expenses going forward? That's an important consideration here that we need to take into account. So we're looking very closely. We've identified a few potential opportunities, but in the next couple of weeks, we are working with Mark Randall and with staff at IPL to discuss those things and say, what are the true opportunities to reduce costs? Some of the risks that come into play here, as we look at your system, certainly changes in customer usage or the loss of a large account or large accounts would have an impact to your revenue going forward. Certainly unanticipated capital needs. We're taking into account the current forecasts, we're taking into account current needs for capital improvements, but sometimes there are unanticipated things that could happen that we can't identify today. And then any higher than anticipated costs. When we look at power supply, we recognize that the market currently has been very favorable, but that could change going forward. So it's certainly something that might fluctuate, but our task right now is to get a solid financial plan, recognizing that there are opportunities, we believe, to do some cost reductions in the system, which would help result in some potential lowering of rates further than the 2% action you've taken to date. So that is kind of the update, and I want to open up to your questions because I know this is important consideration to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments or questions? None? Okay. I don't have any questions. I think it's a good overview of kind of where we are, and I like, thank you for giving us sort of the forecast of what we can expect, when as these studies are completed. I think you clearly understand what our desire is to make this utility the most reliable and competitive that we possibly can. So I appreciate the update. Yes, Councilman.
So it seems like there's a lot of moving parts that still have not been decided, and the council's in the process over the next probably 6 to 12 months of making some of those decisions.
Correct.
And all of those are going to affect your projections. So are you going to be giving us a multi-factor decision tree of what will happen if we do this or that? And I'm thinking of things like AMI, the automatic meter infrastructure. I'm thinking of and by the way, there's a couple different options there. So the different
Correct.
options of that, the closing down of Blue Valley, either the closing or the keeping of the combustion turbines, updating combustion turbines, the different scenarios, the multiple scenarios that your company gave us as far as replacing capacity, either from Summit Dogwood or on the open market with Southwest Power Pool. So you see there's all these different
Absolutely.
moving parts and all these decisions that have not been made yet. And so it's going to be very difficult in your position, I would think, to try to give us some concrete answers when we haven't made some of those concrete decisions yet.
Yeah, and I'll update you. I know we were engaged to start this study several months ago. Part of the reason we moved slowly was first that master plan needed to be created with some sense of where things were going to go. We also then were waiting for updates on a completed fiscal year, and we've just recently, within the last month and a half or so, got all the data we needed to put together that preliminary financial plan. Part of what we discussed when we met with staff, Sarah and I met with staff last week, were some of the things you just talked about. Identifying and putting placeholders to run to say, what if this happens? Or what if this is the scenario? Is it a cost increase, a cost reduction? Is it an improvement to revenues? All those we want to try to build in as much functionality as we can into our model so that when we are finished, even if all those decisions haven't been made, we've been able to at least look at opportunities and identify potentially what that might mean. So it is a challenge. I know you're anxious to get results. We are anxious to finish things, but I will tell people that I would rather take a little time to provide as much certainty as we can to our analysis as opposed to trying to rush through something and lack some of that.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Our last item on the agenda tonight is discussion on the citizens' request to speak process. We had discussed at a recent study session altering some of our rules regarding citizens' requests to speak and the signing up process based on sometimes the timing of the agenda coming out. But during that meeting, one of the things that was brought up was a model that many other cities used, which does not require citizens to sign up in advance at all. That there would be a period of time, each council council meeting, prior to the meeting being called to order, where the council would allow time for citizens to come and speak to the council in these chambers at the podium. Following that study session, I heard from a few council members that they liked the idea of that model. We certainly, have as a goal more citizen engagement, and I felt that maybe that would allow people, if something came on the agenda and they didn't know about it in advance or didn't have a chance to sign up, they would still have an opportunity to come and speak to the council. The same rules of procedure would apply in terms of time limit and some of the other rules. So I was seeking some direction from the council tonight to ask the city clerk to draft some language altering our rules of procedure to try to do this on a trial basis, and just to see if we like this, the citizens like this process better or worse than what we currently have. But I think it's a model that I've seen a lot of cities around the country move to, and I think it gives a lot more opportunity for citizens to come and speak to the council without a lot of process to go through. So I'd be happy to open up to discussion or just consensus to draft up some language for the council to consider to try this on a trial basis.
Madam Mayor?
Uh-huh.
I am all for more citizen engagement. My initial problem with the sign-up sheet was that we were not getting our agenda out in enough time for citizens to see it, to sign up to speak by the Friday before the council meeting at noon. And so I absolutely want to change our process to allow more citizen engagement. I do not like having it before the meeting because I think a citizen expects to speak to their whole council, and that means council meeting.
It would be at a council meeting.
Okay, and so it would start at 6 o'clock and it would be televised, or it would start at 5:30 and not be televised? How are we looking at this?
What would you prefer?
I think it should be at the conclusion of our meeting, and if they could hand the clerk a card prior to the council meeting, and you would just call the names. I mean, I don't know how else to do
So
it.
The reason I'm suggesting we're doing it at the beginning of the meeting is so that we avoid having to change the council rules of procedure and let people speak before we vote on items.
Okay,
So that's,
I like that. Okay, I
that's-
never thought about that.
So, I mean, typically they want to hear, a lot of times they come to speak about something we're going to be voting on.
Correct.
So that's why I recommend doing it at the beginning, and then, quite frankly, they don't have to sit through the whole meeting to speak, if they don't choose to.
Very, very true.
Yes,
Member.
yes.
Yeah, maybe we could do something right after roll call or something.
Perfect.
To me, I think, usually it's at the end, and like I say, people are there to speak about the things we're voting on, just might get it out there in the beginning, and someplace right up there in the front would work real good.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Councilman? So, Madam City Clerk, why don't we work on drafting an amendment to the council rules and develop something for the council to consider? And as I say, I think that we should do this on a temporary basis and see how we like it and see how it works before we adopt it permanently. Okay. Are there any other topics for discussion tonight? Yes.
Yeah, while we're looking into this, is there any chance, I've getting a lot of complaints that people at home cannot hear this on the television, and maybe get the city manager to look into that, and maybe do something with this podium. It seems like everybody sticks their nose up to me every time they come up here.
Okay. Will do. I think we do have some plans, some City 7 expenses budgeted to try to improve the quality of the broadcast.
Yeah, it's woefully inadequate for our standards with our customer service, so we're working to try to, I've had the pleasure of being at that podium and sticking my nose in the air too, so we'll work to get that addressed so our citizens can fully engage with us.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Mr. City Manager?
Nothing from me tonight, thank
Okay,
you.
we are adjourned.